So from this start point, Robert Anderson calculates the end of the first weeks, the first 7-week periods, to the end of the prophecy of Malachi, the last Hebrew prophet. The second period then ends with the revelation of Messiah the Prince, so 7 plus 62. As a result of the research into a number of ancient documents, he works out the date of the nativity of Yeshua to autumn of 4 BC. If you're puzzled why isn't Jesus born in 0 BC, that's another story, but he wasn't, you can be sure of that. Luke tells us in chapter 3 verse 1 that Jesus began his ministry in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Robert Anderson writes, now the date of Tiberius Caesar's reign is known with absolute accuracy, and his 15th year, reckoned from his accession, began on the 19th of August, AD 28. Luke states that the Lord was about 30 years old at this time, Luke 3, verse 23. The first Passover of the Lord's ministry on the earth is fixed by the gospel narrative as in Nisan, AD 29, and we're thus enabled to fix AD 32 as the date of the crucifixion. Now, okay, some people may have problems with that date, but that's where he comes to. He then points this to the triumphal entry of Yeshua into Jerusalem. Remember, the prophecy actually says that this is up until the time of the revelation of Messiah the Prince. The revelation of Messiah the Prince means Jesus, the Messiah, being revealed as the Prince or the Nasi or the King who would then reign. Now, if you look in the Gospels, you'll find that at this time, Jesus, coming in the name of the Lord, in the line of David with the right to the throne, is described in Luke chapter 19, verse 39. Up to this time, Jesus has always refused any title to being the king reigning on the throne. But in Luke chapter 19, he comes into Jerusalem, and in verse 37 we see, as he was now drawing near the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works they had seen, saying, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. So Jesus comes in the name of the Lord, and he's greeted by the crowd saying, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. That actually was quite a political statement in one sense. Jesus coming as the King in the name of the Lord was not just Jesus coming as, was in a sense adding to what he already was. And if he was coming in as the King, then that was a messianic title. And we read then, some of the Pharisees called to him from the crowd, teacher, rebuke your disciples. And he answered and said to them, I tell you, if these should keep silent, the very stones themselves would cry out. The Pharisees said, tell your disciples to shut up. They can't say that to you. They're saying that to you. They're greeting you as the Messianic King coming in the name of the Lord. You're not the Messianic King coming in the name of the Lord, so tell them to be quiet. Jesus said if they were quiet, the very stones would cry out, because actually he is the Messianic King, and he was coming in the name of the Lord, this time into Jerusalem, coming with the right of the line of David, with the right to the throne of Israel. Now you can work out from the Gospels, particularly from John chapter 12, and again I haven't time to go into this, but if you check it out, John chapter 12 verses 1 to 12, that the triumphal entry took place on the 10th of Nisan, before the Passover itself began on the 14th of Nisan, the date when the Lord was crucified. According to Exodus chapter 12 verse 3, the Passover lamb was to be taken on the 10th of Nisan to be tested to see that it was perfect, and to be slain on the 14th of Nisan. So the fact that Yeshua rode into Jerusalem on the 10th of Nisan is significant. He was coming in and he was going to be tested to see if he was the pure and perfect lamb to be slain then on the day of the Passover on the 14th of Nisan. In The Coming Prince, Robert Anderson works out the interval between the decree of Artaxerxes and the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. The Julian date of the 10th of Nisan was Sunday, the 6th of April, AD 32. What was the length of the period intervening between the issuing of the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and the public advent of Messiah the Prince between the 14th of March, BC 445 and the 6th of April, AD 32? The interval contained exactly, and to the very day, 173,880 days, or 7 times 69 prophetic years of 360 days. The first 69 weeks of Gabriel's prophecy. So he actually says that this prophecy was fulfilled to the letter by Yeshua riding into Jerusalem on the day of his triumphal entry. Now some people might say, well, that's a bit far-fetched, I can't work out all the maths and I can't quite believe that. Even if you can't believe that, this prophecy speaks about Yeshua. The revelation of Messiah the Prince would not lead to him taking the throne of David and ruling and reigning on the earth. This was the expectation, and this was the hope, that the Messiah would come, he would rule and reign, he would deliver Israel from their enemies, from the Romans, he would set up the Messianic kingdom, ruling from Jerusalem. This will not in fact take place until after the second coming.